What are the odds that big tech, including military industry, is already too big for the government to deal with? What if big tech pushes back? Well, for the last few decades, big tech has been pushing back. The amount of money they spend by Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple for lobbying in Washington is huge. Dozens of millions of dollars, and they've made lots of arguments of why we should not be regulated or having light regulation. And even today, they say, yes, we realize you have to regulate us, but of course the devil is into the details. The type of regulation they would want actually is not going to be very binding, is not going to be breaking up. This big tech firm is not going to restrict them from being both platforms and providing their own goods and services. And as I pointed out, if you regulate a lot a sector and there are a huge amount of cost of regulation and compliance costs, big tech becomes more powerful because YouTube can spend $100 million to follow the EU digital copyright directive, but if you're a small streaming services, you cannot spend that money to make sure that there is no copyrighted material, and therefore actually that type of regulation makes incumbent even more entrenched. So when you want to regulate, some types of regulation actually are going to be great for Facebook, for Amazon, for Apple, for Microsoft, for Google. You have to have the right type of the regulation, because actual regulation may actually traditionally restrict competition rather than increase competition, because you're making the incumbent bigger, more stronger, more regulated, more powerful, and no entrant can have the same compliance cost and spending on it and so on. Now, is big tech become too big to regulate, too big to break up or tax? Not yet. What has happened in the last 2 years is there has been a significant backlash against big tech. The backlash is coming on one side from the right, because the right says that some of these firms have an anti-conservative bias. That's not true, but the argument has been made that Facebook or Google and so on may have a bias against right-wing or conservative points of view. That's not true, but there was actually a lot of the news that are being distributed, including misinformation and fake news on Facebook, are conservative, but that has been the traditional right-wing argument against big tech. And in the left, historically, the left was more sympathetic to big tech, but now the left has realized that big tech has a huge amount of power, as abuses market power. There are issues having to do with the privacy, and the left is caring about the privacy, and there's issues also about how foreign agents or domestic agents have been using misinformation, fake news, deep fakes, and other ways to distort our political system, to distort our electoral system, to create misinformation, and to try to interfere in our own election. And therefore, in the past, maybe big tech and Silicon Valley had the sympathy of the Democratic Party, but now increasingly Elizabeth Warren has been proposing, for example, break up of big tech. Senator Mark Warner has been proposing lots of different types of regulation to limit the power of big tech, and all the other presidential candidates, not all of them favor the breakup of big tech, but they found the ideas of Elizabeth Warren on limiting essentially the power of big tech, either by breaking them up or not allowing platform utilities to provide goods and services, as appealing ideas. So I would say in the last 2 years there's been a radical shift in the way people think about big tech, even in the United States. The only caveat is that in the future, the US is going to use big tech as national champion to try to beat China in AI, in robotic, in automation, in e-commerce, in cyber warfare, in treating diseases and so on. And therefore, if big tech is part of the national security industrial complex, we have to protect our national champions, because otherwise Alibaba, Tencent, Weibo, Baidu, wechatpay, alipay, and so on become more powerful, and therefore we're going to use big tech as our national champion to achieve national security objective. Breaking them up doesn't make sense. Now, there may be intelligent way of maintaining your national champions and maintaining more competition and data portability and interoperability and fostering more competition rather than reducing it. How can you balance the fact that you need some big firms that have power, but you want to have more competition is an art, and I hope that whoever is going to be elected is going to consider that the power of big tech has become excessive. We have to regulate it, because one of the reasons why we have a rise in income and wealth inequality is becoming a problem with growth, a problem with social and political instability, is the power of big business, and within big business, the power of big tech that has these very large superstar firms that are becoming even bigger superstar and are gaining even more market share and integrating more goods and more services within their own services, and therefore they're distorting competition and reducing competition over time. Let me see if there is any other question. I did not see them, but there might be. Yes, there is a last question today. This is from Arturo Perez.